into law, that's a problem. You need to back that. Okay, if you wanna argue, do we allow non-citizens to work, that's a different debate. But to give them the same IDs as citizens that causes confusions,
Yeah, so
it's
that,
purposeful.
yeah, so that's a legislative argument that needs to be made.
And we'd like you to back us up on that.
So again,
So I don't think you
what I'm saying is that we have a process now. You don't think that process is tight enough?
Yes.
If someone were to propose legislation that would tighten that process, that we could get behind, that does not do what the gentleman here said, which is, self-incrimination, then we would certainly consider getting behind that. But again, it's a complex situation because you do wanna deal with the law, the federal law, and you wanna deal with the idea of self-incrimination, and you wanna make sure the process is tight.
Self-incrimination.
The idea when you have if you're identifying someone through an ID, right? You're identifying who they are, where you and I, we're identified as, when is the real ID?
2025.
2025. So that's to your point, right? The real ID would settle all of this, right?
Will it?
No, it won't.
No, it would not. It should look totally different.
Person again.
It should look totally different. If somebody has a CDL license, it says CDL on it. It has, it has something on it. Something clearly
That's okay for
different.
CDL drivers, just not for illegal immigrants.
Underage drugs.
Hang on one second.
Underage drivers.
Yes.
My
I
question
don't
was about, when you go to vote on voting day, you have to show your ID, right, when it goes in the little machine, so it gets wherever it goes to your database. My question is about absentee and mail-in ballots. Do they have to also show some type of ID in order to identify themselves?
So
Is that-
they, not a photo ID, but they have their signatures matched. So when you go vote, so if you vote in person on election day, you're absolutely right. You put your license on the tray, it takes a picture of it, your information signs up. You do sign that poll book, but that signature is not matched to anything. You've shown your ID. But for the mail ballot voters, because they don't show ID, their signatures are matched before their vote's counted. So the Board of Elections gets that envelope back with the ballot inside it. They take that signature and they match it to that voter's signature in the voter registration system. If it matches, they will count the vote. If it doesn't, they notify the voter to say, hey, your signature doesn't match, you've gotta come in and talk to us. And they're notified of that via mail and email if they have one on file, so that they can rectify the issue.
But you
But
can
their
sign
vote
it
still
with an
counts.
X, how can you,
You can sign it by an X, and I talked to the Board of Elections.
that's wrong. With no witnesses
So-
anymore.
So that-
Yeah, there's no
so-
witness.
So the witness, so the X piece, yes, so there is a stipulation if you're unable to sign. I talked to the Board of Elections this week, I think they said in 2022 it happened 60-something times. It doesn't happen often where people are unable to sign, but that is for people who, if they have a medical issue where they used to be able to sign and now they can't, or voters who are disabled, that's why that's there. But I talked to the board, and I'm happy to provide Miguel's information. He said that I think it happened 67 times in the last election.
67, one vote.
And
It's
there's a
put
pro-
over-
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right, one
That's
vote.
right.
So
And
how
then-
is this treating
Hold on,
electors?
And
Okay.
there's a proposed change to that.
Yes.
The Board of Elections
That
has
needs
put
to be-
forward that we're supporting.
Yeah, and as far as the witnesses go, that was also
What's the
changed.
change?
That you would not be able to use an X.
Oh, okay.
Right, so
Is
you're
it-
not gonna be able to have anything now? That's what I saw on the.
So
No,
the
no.
bill, yeah,
You would have a witness.
yeah, they haven't put this bill in yet, so the Board of Elections at their last meeting, they debated a bill that they actually put in last year that would remove the ability to put an X and require an assistant to do it. So the voters.
So how would that go with the signature verification process that you're just discussing now?
Yeah, I don't, you'd have to talk to the board.
Would it be too much to
That's
ask
their
to
bill.
have them just maybe go to the library and take a photo ID of their ID and put it in with their vote, or is that just too much? Is that
Or on the
something
outside of
that-
the envelope, if it's a mail ballot, to put some kind of identification.
Yeah, there's also a bill in for that as well.
There is.
In the House, I'm not sure it's been introduced in
I
the
Well,
see.
Senate.
it's not to make a copy, you have to write down your number or the last 4 digits
So
of your
the
social.
social.
Oh, okay.
So that
I
bill
haven't
is,
seen it yet, but-
that bill is being proposed as well.
A lot of questions. We haven't had.
So you said you agreed with giving the provisional licenses, and you read the bill,
I did.
and you approved the bill, you
I
agreed with
voted
it.
yes.
So you didn't think, and I know this was talked about, but it wasn't really clarified because there was a lot of talk, but you felt it was okay that they were identical. You didn't see a problem with that,
Right.
you didn't see any confusion.
No, and I knew that the process existed already for documented non-citizens to be identified in the VMB data file as non-citizens.
But
So
if-
in regard to the voting process, that I already knew that. In regard to the debate around why they should look the same, my view was that we should not identify someone as undocumented through their license, and we wanted to give them an opportunity they're
Why not?
here.
Why,
give them
they're
an
Why not?
opportunity.
breaking the law.
People have
Well, they-
green
they-
cards,
Anyway,
people
anyway,
have,
that's- yeah.
You know.
Some of them broke the law originally, right, by coming across the border.
Some?
of them, no, that's, I mean, that's.
Some of them?
Okay, so,
So
let's move on.
700 and something tariffs have been
Some
caught.
Yeah,
overstayed
that's another
visas,
story.
Some overstayed visas.
In
don't
your
think
house?
the borders-
What if they were in your
I
house?
just wanted to clarify.
So, but this is
My question is,
this is really a
why are
federal
we still,
debate.
why
This is
are we
not a
still
state
following?
debate.
It's a state debate.
It is a state
It is a
debate.
state
Election
The immigration debate. Is
state
the-
debate.
What about the Green Center in Providence?
We want her to ask a
We
question.
opened
Go
up
ahead.
that
What's your
door.
question?
but I,
My question is, why are we still following pre-COVID laws?
So if you're referring to the witness notary, for example, that was suspended via executive order in 2020 by the governor on mail ballots, that has since been codified by the General Assembly. So anything that was done in 2020, if we're still doing it now, that means that the General Assembly has voted to codify it. So it's not as if we're still acting on what was in
Emergency
place.
services, so they
Correct.
codified, that we can have mail-ins for 3 weeks, that, you know, boxes aren't monitored, that,
That's another thing, the boxes.
Yeah, so the boxes are, the boxes are monitored, 24/7 surveillance on the mail ballot drop boxes, and that's.
they are
then
not, are you
they
kidding me?
destroy them
Yeah, so
though.
every city and town has cameras on,
Okay.
they have cameras on it,
Yeah,
yep,
they
and
do.
24/7, it's by the law, and that happened also after, that happened in 2022. So we purchased the drop boxes in 2020, and through, through money we got from the federal government, and after that, in 2021, 2022, 2023, all of these laws have been updated based on some of the stuff that we did in 2020. So we're not still operating under COVID emergency resolutions,
So,
we're now.
so it's all
We know
codified,
that.
so,
We know.
Well, the ones you mentioned are, so, yes.
what about the mail-in ballots? What happened to you had to have a doctor's note or,
So that, I mean, that changed in 2011. So when the voter ID bill passed in 2011, they also passed the mail ballot law to allow anybody to vote by mail for any reason. So that's been on the books for over 10 years.
but you have to request it.
Correct.
Okay, well, how come tons and tons, thousands of people are getting mail-in ballots that haven't
Not in
requested?
Rhode Island.
Not
Oh,
ballots,
yes.
they're getting
Rhode
a
Island.
request
Yes,
for
The
it's
more
request.
ballots.
The
The
request.
application,
Yeah, so
the
we did
application.
that, we did that one time
That
for
was
COVID.
COVID.
We did it one time.
People are still getting
Well, then if you're, well, time out, if you're getting them, that means either a campaign sent it to you,
Right.
or someone other than the state or locality. So we did that one time in 2020, and that's it. So if you're getting them again, that means that a campaign, which is, I know a number of campaigns did this, they're sending, which is legal. You can send an application to somebody,
Yeah.
they still have to fill it out and send it back in order for us to
Everything's
send it out.
legal.
Who actually performs the oversight with regard to the mail ballot drop
But
boxes?
they're
And
not
what kind of
requesting it.
Board
standards
of
are
Elections. So the Board of Elections
No,
has
wait,
rules
hang on a
for-
second. Let me finish my question. What kind of standard is being used for the surveillance cameras that are on these mail ballot drop boxes? Who's performing the oversight of those while those boxes, I mean, they're open, if I understand correctly, how many hours per cycle? They're open a long time, aren't they?
Well,
The mail, 24 hours a day,
For
correct?
20 days.
So 20 days at least, right? So those are open 24 hours a day, and who's performing the oversight during those time periods? And do you have somebody dedicated that the State Board of Elections is paying to make sure that there's, or by the towns, who's actually watching those things to make sure there's nothing wrong going on. I just want to point out that
We're gonna-
there was
let
great
me answer the question,
testimony.
right?
Okay,
So-
before,
so
there's
now
one
the
last
question-
thing.
The answer to your question is,
Okay, sure.
because this was asked at the last forum.
Right.
And Senator Rogers had a great suggestion about the
Right.
pixels, and we sent.
Right, the resolution.
Exactly, so I'm not sure.
We support that.
That's right, and so the Board of Elections has rules and regulations regarding the drop boxes. So the Board of Elections oversees, not only do they oversee the local boards in general, but they are in charge of anything to do with mail ballots. So while we send the mail ballot, all of that, after that, goes to the Board of Elections. So they've got rules and regulations that talk about their surveillance. It's very clear in the regulations that they have to be surveilled. And then the next step, you'd have to ask them how they instruct the towns to watch it, to oversee it.
And the expenses that are incurred for overseeing it, those are the town issues?
Yeah, if the Board of Elections
Kind of
requires the towns to do it, then yeah.
So if nobody's watching those, if it's proven that nobody's watching those, and the video's there, it's available, but nobody's watching it, does that still count as being surveyed and monitored?
Yeah, of course, because the camera's on.
Even though
24
nobody's looking at it, it's being
I
recorded,
don't
but
know
nobody's
that,
looking at it.
I'm not willing to say that they're not being looked at.
Well, I actually know that at least one of them hasn't been looked at in the town.
Yeah, so then you can, then you can have the Board of Elections can certainly update those regulations to include whatever you think is best, and it's all done in public.
The reason why I ask this is there's a legitimate concern that was raised, and the gentleman that presented the evidence during the discussions about the Rhode Island Vote Act stuff had to do with the fact that he was in Washington State at one point and watched what happened when individuals poured in inks and gasoline and other things inside the mail ballot drop boxes and literally destroying people's hot voted ballots. That's why I raise this concern. There's that, and the other issue is that prior to the time of mail ballot drop boxes being used, those were.
17. 1 Peter X-ray 109. Sandy Bonnet, Woodville.
Those were considered to be archived type of materials. Those are actually voted documents, and they are pretty much a person's life. I mean, you gotta admit that a ballot is worth a person's life because the state's making laws that can impact their life. So when you have something like that, they were originally held inside a vault, but now you have them outside, and if they're not secured, do we have an audit trail? What kinds of beyond the surveillance, do we have an audit trail of who's handling what when with regard to all of those things?
Yes.
How come we can have a receipt being generated by an ATM with a picture directed, camera directed right at you of who's dropping something in, but we don't have these on these steel boxes?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so on that piece, I mean, certainly you can advocate for that if
Yes.
you'd like, but to go back to your
Good
point about the
idea.
gas and the ink, so the drop boxes we have were designed so that it makes it nearly impossible to get anything other than something as thin as a piece or two of paper through the drop boxes. Not impossible, I get what you're saying, but they have been designed to mitigate a lot of that entry of a foreign substance. And then as far as the chain of custody, yes, so for the drop box at our office specifically, the ballots are not in that drop box for more than probably 12 hours, overnight. We check it before we leave, and as soon as we get in the morning, and we have the person the two people who go out and check that drop box sign the form of how many ballots, I'm sorry? Two people.
In all those opposing parties and that kind of stuff?
Well, it's 2 staff from our office. At our office, it's 2
There's
staff
one
members.
Two staff members.
Yeah, so we have one
So you
outside our office.
So you don't have the distinct two different oppositional, like
Parties.
Republican parties
We
or
have
whatever?
we have two election officials that go out and
Okay.
they sign a paper saying how many ballots are in the drop box, and they initial it, and then at the end of the day, we go back out and we pick them up again and we sign it, and then the Board of Elections has couriers that go around to the entire state, all the cities and towns, to pick up the ballots from the cities and towns. So once they're brought in, they're locked and kept under.
And there's a complete audit chain of custody available for all of those.
Yes.
Even if there are forms that aren't completed properly?
Well, we were talking about voted ballots.
I'm talking about chain of custody forms that you were just talking about that people sign. If they're not signed and they're not completed properly, how do we know that that process actually
So we
accurately?
turn those over to the Board of Elections. So when the Board of Elections picks up the ballots from our office, we provide the sheet. Yeah, we provide the sheet so that they could, yes, go back and say on October 29th, Rob Rock and Kathy Placencia went out to the drop box, they picked up 17 ballots. They initialed it, and we've got 17,000.
So even that's centralized?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys are in favor of centralizing aspects of our elections?
Which aspect?
All of
All
the,
of it.
I mean,
No, I
obviously
think
we're.
poll workers should be hired locally. I think that the cities and towns should run their elections